Hi and welcome. My name is Nicole with morningchores.com. Today is the third video in our preparedness series. Today we're discussing the categories of fire, first aid, security, and light. If you're a seasoned viewer, welcome back. If you're new, we would love for you to hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up. But I highly encourage, if you are new here, to go back and watch our previous two videos. The links are in the description box below. The first video, we gave an overview of preparedness. We talked about why you would want to prepare for an emergency situation. We also discussed some scenarios that you might confront where preparedness and having supplies on hand would come in handy. And then I gave a brief overview of my top 10 supply list. The second video, we went over water, shelter, and food in a little bit more detail. So again, check those two videos out and then come back and meet us here. Now, before we begin, I want to remind you of my 3 basic guidelines that we're applying to the situation. The first rule or guideline is only stock up on items that your family actually uses. It's very easy to just stock up on things that you think you may use, and then you end up never using it, and it ends up becoming wasted. And a good example of this is with food. A lot of times we'll stock up on things because it has a long shelf life or it's high in protein. But the purpose of stocking up with food is that you want to cycle through it so it never goes bad. So if you're stocking up things that your family just doesn't like to eat, then more than likely at some point you'll be throwing it away. So only stock up on things your family actually uses. There may be a few one-off items that you would only use in an emergency situation, and that's okay. But just keep this in mind because it will save you a lot of time and a lot of money. My second guideline or rule is always have 3 different methods for achieving the same goal. So as I talked about water in the previous video, I mentioned that you need to have 3 different ways to acquire clean drinking water. That way, if one of your methods fails, you have 2 to go back on. And the last guideline I have for today is we are prepping or preparing for 3 days. So if you're new to prepping and it just overwhelms you, I always say start with 3 days, because more than likely most emergency situations that we go through usually last anywhere from 1 to 5 days. Yes, there's some that could last longer, but I think if you just start here, it will give you a good baseline, and then you can always add to and extend your supply list for longer periods of time later. Our first category we're discussing today is fire. Fire can provide multiple things for us, such as warmth, light. It's a means to purify your water, as well as boil for cleaning, such as dishes, laundry, or keeping yourself clean. And it also provides a means for cooking. So fire can do a lot of things for us. If you live in a colder climate or somewhere where you experience winter, then you definitely need to consider warmth. And you may be thinking, well, I'll just pile the blankets on or put my winter jacket on and I'll be okay. And that might be okay for a short period of time, but then you're gonna have to start considering things like hypothermia and frostbite. So you want to make sure that you have some kind of means to get warm. And a fire is a really easy way to do that. If you live in an apartment and you have a balcony, as long as your landlord allows it, you can always have a small fire pit on your balcony. If you have property, though, it makes it easier to create a fire pit outside, so that way you have somewhere to just get warm, boil water, keep things clean, and you have a little bit of light as well. Of course, having a wood stove inside your home is ideal because now you're protected from the outdoor elements, but then you're also keeping your space warm. Now you want to make sure that you have the supplies to start a fire. Something as simple as matches, lighters, even candles, but you also need some kindling. Newspaper also helps. You can also make fire starters with dryer lint. I've actually done this. I'll save my toilet paper rolls, stuff dryer lint inside, and it makes a great fire starter because it actually lasts quite a long time as well, so you have more of a chance to get your fire going. You also want to make sure you have firewood. That's always helpful. And then, you also want different ways to start the fire. I mentioned the lighters and the matches, but also having a ferro rod with steel. This is a way that you can start a fire without a match, because you just never know. Your matches might get wet, and then you need another method for starting a fire. So this is where my 3's rule comes into play. You need 3 different methods for accomplishing the same goal. The next category we're going to discuss is your first aid cabinet. This is really important to have stocked up and well stocked and ready to go before the sickness happens or whatever it is that happens. So to begin, I would just sit down and make a list of things that you already are using on a regular basis. So this would be things like Band-Aids, Neosporin, acetaminophen, ibuprofen, cold medicine, cough drops, things like that. So make a list of what you're already using and just make sure you have those things on hand at all times. Also, I would encourage you to choose twice a year to go through your medicine cabinet and make sure everything is up to date. There's nothing expired, there's no empty bandage boxes. Everything is full and ready to go, because there's nothing worse than having to run to the store when everyone's sick. You know, if you already have it on hand, you're not going to have to do that. Once you have your basic medicine cabinet in place, you can expand out. You can add some tools like a stethoscope or blood pressure cuff or a pulse ox. You should already have a thermometer. I feel like that's something you should just already have on hand, especially if you have children. You could also add some spring wraps or a tourniquet. If you feel like you don't know how to use these tools, I would highly recommend that you take a CPR class or a first aid class so that you can get familiar with using these. From here, you may want to expand into the homeopathic world and with herbs. If I had to choose my top 4 herbs to keep on hand, I would keep colloidal silver. This is known as nature's antibiotic. It can be used topically and internally for so many different things. I would have activated charcoal. I would have lavender essential oil and peppermint essential oil. Now you want to make sure that your essential oils are food grade. You do not want to just have a basic essential oil, because a lot of those you cannot ingest. So you want to make sure it's food grade, even practitioner grade. But these are the 4 herbs. If I had to choose just 4, that's what I would keep on hand. And again, if you're not familiar with using herbs or homeopathics, I highly recommend that you take a class or read a book. I will link a book in the description box below. Another way to expand your medicine cabinet is to grow healing foods on your property. So if you have the space to have a garden or grow things like onions, garlic, elderberry, all of these types of things are really, really healing. They have a lot of good medicinal value, and I'm sure there's many, many more, but these are a couple to get you started and get you thinking about. But also adding some nutritious food on your property will also be just another tool in your toolkit. Our next category is light, and I kind of separated this one out from fire because I just think it deserves its own category, because not only should you have things like matches and candles on hand, but you could branch out and have oil lamps, flashlights, headlamps, lanterns. So you also want to make sure that you store batteries on hand, but it is important that you have a way to provide light, especially if the power's out and you're in some type of grid down situation. You would be amazed at how dark it actually gets when there's no power. Now, I live in the country, so it's already pretty dark outside. We don't have street lamps or anything, but it's even more dark, I feel, when all the power's out. So you want to make sure you have something on hand, because you just never know. You're probably going to need light when it gets dark to see or be able to do something. So you want to make sure you have these on hand. And I highly recommend that you keep all your extras in a plastic container, in a closet or a basement. But then we have things kind of around the house, almost in every room. I have either a flashlight, a candle, an oil lamp, something so that if the power goes out, no matter where I'm at in the house, I can easily grab something and turn it on, especially if it's at nighttime. And the last category is security. Now, this isn't really a major category unless the power was out for a long period of time, but I do think it's something that you need to consider. So what do I mean by security? I mean having tools and things in place to keep you and your family safe. So you could start with an easy one. Now, of course, you would need electricity or some means of power to have these items, but things like cameras, sensors, things like this around your house so that you're aware of what's going on. Now, when it comes to protecting yourself and your family, you could do things like take self-defense classes. Of course, you could take that further and have certain tools on hand to protect yourself and your family, but this greatly depends on where you live and what the laws are. So I highly recommend that you research those things first before you just go and start buying things. And also, whatever you purchase, you need to know how to use it and use it properly. So you want to make sure that whatever you have on hand, you don't want the first time to use that tool or item to protect yourself in the emergency situation. You need to know how to use it ahead of time, so that way you're prepared, because usually when you're in a stressful situation, you're not thinking clearly. So you need to be able to use that tool in a kind of automatic way where you don't have to think too much about it. So whatever you purchase for your security and safety, just make sure you know how to use it ahead of time. Thank you for joining me in today's video. I hope you found it helpful and encouraging. All the links mentioned are in the description box below. The next video, and it will also be our last video in the Preparedness series, we will be discussing cleanliness, which also includes toiletries and clothing, tools, and entertainment. So look forward to that. You can also take the time to head over to morningchores.com. There's information over there about animal husbandry, beekeeping, gardening, sustainability, more ways that you can build up your skill sets, so if an emergency happens, you're more prepared.